Welcome back to Totally Abstracted. I'm Michelle, and today we're talking about colour. Not colour theory, not rules, not split complementary guidelines, but colour as emotion and instinct. If the last episode was about embracing the layered mindset, this one is about listening to the emotional frequency underneath your palette choices. Because whether we admit it or not, we often don't choose colours with our brains. We choose them with our bodies first. I want to begin with something personal. Over the last few weeks, I've been feeling a little disconnected from my landscapes. The marks were fine, the compositions were fine, but the feeling wasn't landing. You know that sensation when the painting is technically working, but something in you isn't. It's a particular kind of frustration because there's nothing you can point to and fix. The painting isn't bad, it's just hollow. I kept showing up in the studio, kept mixing paint, kept making marks, but I was painting from memory rather than presence, going through the motions of what had worked before, rather than listening to what wanted to happen now. And here's what I've learned. That disconnect is always a message. It's your work asking you to come back to yourself. And then I remembered a piece of advice I'd shared with my membership a while back. When you're stuck, return to a colour palette that once felt right. Begin there. There's something beautifully grounding about going back to your old favourites, your emotional home colours. So I reached for my cool blues and violets again, the colours that have carried me through some of the deepest chapters of my life. These are colours I turned to when I first started painting abstract landscapes seriously. The colours I mixed during very early mornings when the house was quiet and I was trying to figure out who I was becoming. They're threaded through years of my work. I mixed my cold wax medium, let everything else drop away and just painted. No pressure, no expectation, no, this needs to become something. Within minutes, the painting settled into place. It felt intuitive and unforced. And that's the magic of colour as emotion. We talk about colour theory as if it's the highest authority, but colour theory is just a map. Emotion is the terrain. The thing about maps is they're useful for navigation, but they don't tell you what it feels like to stand in the landscape. They don't capture the quality of light, a golden hour, or the way certain atmospheric conditions make you want to cry for reasons you can't explain. Colour theory will tell you that blue and orange are complementary, but it won't tell you that a particular dusty blue mixed with burnt sienna might feel exactly like the emotional temperature of a November afternoon when you're processing grief. When you choose colours intuitively, you're responding to something deeper, a memory, an atmosphere, an internal weather pattern. And every colour carries a frequency with it in a very real emotional sense. Blues slow the heart rate, yellows activate alertness, greens create ease. These responses are woven into us long before we could use words. And there's science behind this, and it fascinates me. Our nervous systems respond to colour before our conscious minds even register what we see in. It's primal. Babies react to colour. Animals navigate by it. We evolved alongside these wavelengths of light, and they speak to something ancient in us. But beyond the biology, there's also the accumulated emotional library we carry. The colour of your childhood bedroom, the green of the trees you climbed as a child, the particular shade of blue in your grandmother's kitchen. These colours are encoded with feeling, with memory, with a whole constellation of associations that are uniquely yours. When you work with colour this way, painting stops being an exercise in getting it right and becomes a conversation with your own interior world. Think about your favourite palettes from the past. There's a reason they resonated. They matched who you were at that moment, your inner light, your emotional temperature. I've kept photos of my work over the years, and when I look back chronologically, I can see my emotional journey written in colour shifts. There was a period of warm ochres and terracottas when I was feeling more grounded and more connected to the physical world. A phase of near monochrome greys when I was processing something heavy, I needed to strip everything back to essentials. And always woven through it all, those cool blues, violets, permanent rose, my home base, the colours I return to when I need to remember myself. Your work probably has these patterns too if you look for them. Threads of colour that appear and reappear, marking different seasons of your creative life. And the opposite is true too. Sometimes you're drawn to a colour because it's the thing you need, not the thing you are. A craving, a desire, a self-correction. I've noticed that when I'm overwhelmed, I gravitate towards softer violets and greyed blues. They're like a cool cloth on the forehead. When I'm feeling braver, I reach for ochres and deep greens, colours that feel rooted and grounded. Pay attention to this instinct. Your body often knows what you need before your mind does. That sudden shift toward a colour you don't normally use. That's not random, that's your intuition speaking in pigment. So how do you find colours that reflect your mood rather than realism? I think you should start by noticing what you're drawn to before you try to make sense of it. Don't ask, does this look like a landscape? Ask, does this feel like my inner weather today? This is harder than it sounds because we train to think representationally. We see a reference photo of a sunset and immediately think orange, pink, purple. But what if that sunset feels melancholic to you? What if the emotional truth of that moment is actually a muted grey blue? What if your inner experience of beauty in that moment has nothing to do with the literal colours in front of you? So give yourself permission to deviate, to follow feeling over fact. Lay out your paints and see what your hand reaches for. Not your plan, your hand. And if you're feeling lost, go back to your emotional home palette, the one that has held you before. There's a reason it feels like a safe harbour, and there's no shame in returning to what's worked. In fact, I think it's essential. We get so caught up in the pressure to constantly innovate, to always be doing something new, that we forget the value of circling back, of deepening rather than expanding. Some artists work with essentially the same limited palette their entire careers, and rather than feeling repetitive, their work becomes more nuanced, more layered, more themselves with every painting. And one more thing I'll invite you to explore, letting colour lead the painting. Instead of deciding the composition and adding colour afterwards, choose a palette first and let it tell you what kind of landscape wants to emerge. It's amazing how often the colours know the story before you do. Try this. Pull 3 to 5 colours that feel right for this moment. Don't think about what you're going to paint. Just choose the colours. Then start making marks. See where they want to go. Watch what kinds of spaces they create. What kind of mood emerges. Let the palette dictate the direction. Colour is a language, and when you let it speak freely, the painting becomes something more than an arrangement of shapes. It becomes a portrait of your interior landscape. This is what I love most about working abstractly with colour. You're not translating the external world, you're expressing the internal one. Every painting becomes a kind of emotional self-portrait, even when it looks like sky and earth and horizon. So if you're listening today and you felt that disconnect, or you've been tight at the easel, try going back to the colours that once felt like home. Let them guide you somewhere new. Or try choosing colours based purely on how they make you feel in this moment. Not how they should look together, not whether they're correct for the subject, just whether they resonate with what's alive in you right now. Because sometimes the way back into your work isn't through technique or logic, or a new brush or a better reference photo. Sometimes it's as simple as remembering the colours that once held you and letting them hold you again. The paintings that move people aren't always the most technically accomplished ones. They're the ones where something true was said, where the artist was fully present, where emotion found its way into pigment and stayed there, waiting for someone to feel it too. And that kind of truth doesn't come from following rules. It comes from listening to your body, to your instincts, to that quiet inner voice that says, yes, this blue, this exact blue. Thank you for spending this time with me. Until next week, trust your colours, trust yourself, and as always, keep things totally abstracted.